You're watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi. Really glad to be joined from Tel Aviv by Brigadier General retired Yaron Rosen. He's a former chief of the Israel Defense Forces Cyber Staff, the former Israel Air Force Air Division Commander, and is a co-founder and president of TOCA, a cyber capacity building company. General Rosen, thank you so much for giving us time on StratNews Global.
Thank you so much for having me here, Amitabh.
Just General, I mean, cybersecurity is such an issue. It's been an issue for years now, but especially in the pandemic. And of late, I mean, last year in 2020, we saw the SolarWinds cyber, if you want to call it a booby trap, which was described as the largest penetration of Western governments post the Cold War or even in the modern era. Can you explain to us, General, how serious cyber threats really are?
Yes, it's a great question, and I think a great challenge we have these days. And I think the metaphor of the COVID-19 pandemic is a great way to explain this. I mean, the landscape, the digital landscape we all live in and thrive with is growing more and more. And unlike the traditional domains that we are used to, protecting borders and skies and seas, the digital landscape is growing very, very fast, and protecting this landscape takes a lot of effort. Just like protecting the body, you have an immune system, and you need to deal with the viruses. So in a normal world where people cooperate, you will get a vaccine from someone who knows how to make it. And in the digital landscape, it's almost the same. You would need somehow to overcome this huge challenge, this huge problem that countries are dealing with. They need to understand where the threat is. They need to understand how serious the threat is, and they need to intervene and cope with the threat and somehow find a vaccine and deal with it. This is a very big challenge these days with the digital landscape, and that is what we are seeing all over the world.
General Rosen, when you're talking about this threat, an excellent example you gave using COVID to explain it simply. But now when you look at cyber threats, there's phishing, whether it's individuals or even thousands of people. Then there are cyber threats that are used by criminal organizations, by terrorist organizations, and non-state actors. And we now are even seeing, states using cyber warfare. How do you distinguish between all of those?
I think it's really useful, again, to use the metaphor of our body. The digital landscape is a total mirror of humanity. I mean, people are using in the real world everything they can do to sort of use their powers to influence. So that is exactly what we're seeing. I mean, we still have criminal activity. We still have states wanting to influence each other. And you can see, again, going to the numbers and what we're seeing worldwide, the numbers are just staggering. Just in 2019, just as an example, North Korea stole from cryptocurrencies and banks worldwide over $2 billion. The amount of the threat, the growth of the threat is like hundreds, over 300% of growth between 2018 and 19 from governments and local authorities and hospitals and whatever in every area we look at, the threat landscape is just growing and growing.
Again, when you talk about states, you mentioned North Korea, Iran has been accused, Russia has been accused. Now with India and China having a military standoff on our northern borders with Tibet as well, there are fears of Chinese cybersecurity, whether it's state-sponsored or whether it's camouflaged behind entities. How do countries deal with this new kind of cyber warfare?
I think, again, just as I mentioned in the World Health Organization idea I brought in my article, in foreign policy. I think that it's very useful to understand how countries need to work both internally, inside states, between states and federal, and outside with the whole world in order to cope with such a challenge. The cyber domain, the digital domain, it's global. It doesn't care about borders or anything. So you have to be very aware of everything that's going on around the world, and to be able to do that, again, just like we're seeing on how the World Health Organization is helping countries deal with the COVID-19. My suggestion was to really look at this in every level on the exact same at the exact same way. You need to collaborate. You need to create collaborations in order to understand the threat, and then you need to collaborate and form alliances in order to deal with the threats, to attribute where is the threat coming from. And there are very few countries around the world who actually know how to attribute. And this is something very important. The world needs leadership in this space, exactly, and really exactly like the world needs leadership from strong nations around the world who today know how to operate much better in this space, in this domain, than other countries. We need this global body that will start, just as we're seeing with the World Health Organization, spread this knowledge, spread this norms, standards, and make this information available for other states that are only growing and starting to learn in this space. We are only in the first decade, practically, of this global warfare going into all areas of life, whether it is defending our economies, defending our political systems, and defending our defense systems. And the SolarWinds hack is a perfect example of such a case. This is a huge espionage campaign, and states need to protect their sovereignty, just like you are doing now on your northern border with China. You need to protect your sovereignty in cyberspace.
We're talking about protecting security in cyberspace, and Israel is known as one of those countries which is highly advanced in that. Cooperation between India and Israel is multi-dimensional already, but if you go back in time, I think it was in 2014 when Prime Minister Netanyahu first broached the subject with Prime Minister Modi, possibly on the sidelines of the UNGA, I think. But subsequently, there have been MOUs that have also been signed on the security field, right?
Yes, I think we're both fortunate, very fortunate, to have this collaboration building up. I think the last year, actually, during the pandemic, in July 2020, there was a final signing of an agreement between the Israeli National Cyber Directorate and the Indian Cyber Directorate. And I think this is a great point and great place to start the collaboration between countries. India has a great human resource. And the good news about learning in cyberspace is your size, the country size doesn't matter. If you have a big country such as India, it's only better. But the biggest thing is you need to develop the human resource capacity in a very, very orderly way in order to build this in the long term, to be able to build the bodies, the responsible bodies. Because again, I always use this metaphor, just like in our body, you need to know where to send the white blood cells. And you need these campaign leaders inside government to be able to protect the private sector, the critical infrastructure, the businesses, the banks, and your borders against external threats, whether they are criminal, whether they are from state or non-state actors. All of this requires a lot of knowledge, which Israel has gladly, because it has been ahead of this game for about 2 decades, about a decade ahead of this game compared to the rest of the world. So we are quite strong and quite happy to be collaborating with countries globally.
Exactly, General Zen. And I mean, just to try and distinguish between, say, military threats, when there is some kind of cyber warfare between countries, and like you're pointing out, critical infrastructure, whether it's banking, whether it's health, whether it's the power grid, in our case, nuclear power plants. How does a country really protect itself from those kind of threats?
That's a huge challenge and a very good question. First of all, it's a decision made on the federal level, on the highest level, to really start a campaign that will encompass the whole federal and state system and all the way down inside the state systems in every state. So first of all, you need leadership to acknowledge that this is something the country really wants to deal with. Then you have to start prioritizing. Like everything, you cannot defend the whole landscape. It's just a huge landscape and it's growing very fast. So you have to first of all protect and defend with a very clear strategy your critical infrastructure on the federal and state. That is the responsible of the states. And then you have to actually collaborate with the private sector and start building the incentives and incentivizing the private system to start cooperating with the public sector. We have done this as an example with the financial sector, incentivizing the banks to share information. In the beginning, it was very unnatural for between banks competing with each other. At the beginning, it wasn't natural, but when they understood through collaboration that they are actually defending their own interests, nobody gains from not showing information to each other. Everybody gains from collaboration in cyberspace, and that has gained momentum in all of the critical infrastructure areas: water, sewage, electricity, what have you. Every area, collaboration leads to better defense. And when you couple these two with capacity building, cyber academies and such, you really can build a good defense for your country.
Right. General, just reading out from your company website now, TOCA, you say helps trusted government, law enforcement, and security agencies keep citizens safe and defend against terror and crime by developing cutting edge and lawful intelligence gathering tools. Now, when you talk about privacy, data concerns, and you see what China is doing in terms of surveillance of its own people, how do you allay those concerns among private citizens?
I think that, again, understanding that we live really in a very different age, I think that the digital landscape is really a place that, first of all, helps countries grow and flourish and economies and such. So first of all, it's a very good thing. Now, where do we put our borders? Just like we see in the physical domains, where do countries have this agreement? Sometimes it's a written agreement, and sometimes it's an unwritten agreement in trust between citizens and governments. That is for trusted governments to work with the public to understand where they want their privacy to be protected. And since we are working only with trusted governments and only with governments that have laws in place, and actually in cyberspace, in the digital domain, countries have to build legal frameworks.
Yeah.
That is also something we work with governments to build cyber laws. And that also reflects downwards into states and into the relationship between the government and the citizens. When you have that in place, I think people should be very proud of their governments if they want to protect them from criminals and terrorists that want to harm or take their money or whatever. So I think if you put the framework in place, I think states and governments will do the right thing, and citizens should continue to trust their governments, and stability is the biggest thing in this era. We're seeing instability in many areas. This is the time to take care of stabilizing this realm in all aspects.
General Rosen, is absolute pleasure having you on StratNews, and thank you so much for your insights. I suspect we'll be carrying on this conversation over time as well.
A pleasure, Amitabh. Thank you so much.
Just a reminder to all our subscribers, you can just click on the bell icon on YouTube to get notifications for videos like this one. To also help support our kind of journalism, our analysis from an Indian perspective on our website. You can also follow our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.